Hello friends, the title of my topic is Women's Right under International Treaty. Introduction. Women's issue is a world phenomenon. Inequality is a common feature among human beings, particularly between male and female. It rises because of difference in natural qualities like height, weight, and abilities. As a matter of fact, in a patriarchal society, men control by and large all economic, political, religious, and cultural institutions. An analysis of main institutions in society shows that they are all patriarchal in nature. The women's question has attracted the attention of social scientists who finds plenty of area still unexplored for research. Women and their problems have acquired growing importance in our social milieu. The lofty height of idealism on equality as enshrined in the United Nations Charter is a manifestation of anticlimax of inequality which has been in existence in most of all the societies in the world. Equality being the cardinal value of it has against backgrounds of elaborate value and clearly perceive inequalities to secure justice, social, economic, cultural and political to all its citizens has to be the premises. Although the United Nations recognize equality of women starting since 1952 and 1975 by observing International Women's Day followed by different themes annually, and as for this current year, that is 2014, equality for women is progress for all. Commemorating International Women's Day on 7 March at its headquarters in New York. Yet, there is still a lot of discrimination on the basis of sex, and it is increasingly embedded in every structural form. The inferior status of women is established right at her birth. However, there is a new consciousness. The United Nations Declaration on Women's Rights and the World Conference on International Women's Year, held in Mexico City in June 1975, are significant expression of the above-mentioned new consciousness, which was ultimately resorted to the birth of today's topic, that is, women's rights under global law and treaty. Now, global concern. The term woman connotes a female human being of any age. She is considered as the weaker sex due to many reasons. Every woman in the world has been abused, exploited, and discriminated in different ways in all aspects of life. Women are denied and deprived of their rights in social, economic, political, cultural, etc. Their cause is not dispensated justifiably. However, a woman is said to be the pivot of the family and the basic unit of psychological chains in any society. She is one of the first socializing agents for new generation and the psyche factor in all culture and civilizations. And the term treaty is a formal agreement or contract entered into two or more independent states or nations whereby they undertake to carry out obligations imposed on each of them with a view to render public welfare. Women's rights are human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims the equality of the sexes. The Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing in 1995 was an important step forward in terms of human rights for practices. Even now, such practices are not being implemented in the manner they ought to have been. Promoting and protecting of women's rights call for special attention. It has been an important area for all, including the whole world and the international agencies. Now, there is a global recognition of the women's right, and these rights are considered as the integral part of universal human rights standard. This principle was also earlier considered at the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna in 1993. Keeping in view the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that affirms the principle of the inadmissibility of discrimination and proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms set forth therein without distinction of any kind, including distinction based on sex. The Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women was adopted by the General Assembly on 18 December 1979, but it came into force on September 3, 1981. Under this convention, the state parties are required to eliminate discrimination against women in all forms and manifestations. The state parties are also required to embody the principle of the equality of men and women in their constitutions and other laws so that the women may enjoy the same political, social, economic, and cultural rights which the men enjoy. In this convention, obligation has also been imposed to eliminate discrimination against women in marriage and family life. Even earlier, the United Nations General Assembly had adopted Convention on the Political Rights of Women on 20th December 1952. The convention inter alia provided that women shall be entitled to vote in all elections on equal terms with men without any discrimination, and they shall be eligible for election to all publicly elected bodies established by the national law on equal terms with men without any discriminations. Besides, they shall also be entitled to hold public offices and exercise all public functions established by national law on equal terms with men without any discrimination. Women's Rights and UN Initiatives. Article 1 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that all women and men are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Article 3, 4 and 5 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 6, 7 and 8 of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights guarantee that everyone has a right to life in freedom and safety. Then, Article 1, Clause 3 of United Nations Charter, Article 2, Clause 1 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 2, Clause 1 of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and Article 2, Clause 2 of International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights also guarantee that everyone has the right to enjoy human rights and fundamental freedoms without discrimination of any kind, such as on the basis of race, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, natural or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Article 1 of Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in 1979 by the UN General Assembly, is often described as an international Bill of Rights for women. It defines what constitutes discrimination against women and sets up an agenda for national action to end such discrimination. Women shall not be discriminated on the basis of sex, regardless of whether they are married or not. The UN member states agreed at the 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing to facilitate the application and implementation of existing international norms and standards in the realization of the human rights of women. In addition, during armed conflict, all civilians must be treated humanely and protected from all forms of violence and humiliating treatment as provided in the international humanitarian laws and rules. Women's rights are not only protected during peacetime, but also protected during war or armed conflict under the international humanitarian laws and rules, which provide that all civilians must be treated humanely and also protected from all forms of violence and humiliating treatments. Such protective provisions accorded to the civilians during the war of conflict must be provided without discrimination based on sex. When a state fails to protect its population from massive human rights violations caused by genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, war against humanity, the international community, through the UN, has the responsibility to protect those populations using peaceful means and, as a last resort, by using collective force through the Security Council of UN. Now, we have come to violence against women and remedy. According to the United Nations Declaration on Elimination of Violence Against Women adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 20th December 1993, the term violence against women means any act that results in or is likely to cause physical, sexual, or psychological harms or suffering to women, including that of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. Gender-based violence refers to violence directed towards women because she is a woman who is adversely affected disproportionately. Thus, the World Conference at Vienna had condemned gender bias as well as all other forms of sexual harassment and exploitation. The conference concluded that the human rights of women and girls are inalienable, integral, and indivisible part of universal human rights. The Vienna Declaration for the first time does recognize that gender-based violence against women in public and private life as human rights concerns. In 1992, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women adopted General Recommendations 19, in which it confirmed that violence against women constitutes a violation of human rights, emphasizing that states may also be responsible for private acts if they fail to act with diligence to prevent violation of rights or to investigate and punish acts of violence and for promoting compensation. The committee also made recommendations to the states so as to provide effective protection of women against violence. Some of the measures are as follows. A. Effective legal measures, including penal sanctions, civil remedies, and compensatory provisions to protect women against all kinds of violence, including violence and abuse in the family, sexual assault, and sexual harassment in the workplace. B. Preventive measures including public information and education program to change attitudes concerning the role and status of men and women. And C. Protective measures including refugees, counseling, rehabilitation action, and support services for women who are experiencing violence or who are at risk of violence. Then, national obligation. These international human rights treaties adopted by UN General Assembly, such as the declarations, covenants, conventions, and the protocols, prohibit sexual exploitation, including enforced prostitution, sexual servitude, sexual slavery, rape, sexual abuse, forced pregnancy, and forced sterilization, illegal trafficking, and domestic violence committed against women. In this regard, the treaty monitoring bodies set up under the various covenants and conventions can also have global surveillance over the progress and development made by the high contracting states parties. To mention some of the means and methods for protecting women's rights under the international treaties, the reporting procedure, communication procedure, and conciliation process are some of the important available methods for the said purpose. It is worth to mention the statement given by the UN Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon while observing International Women's Day. Quote, "This International Women's Day, we are highlighting the importance of achieving equality for women and girls, not simply because it is a matter of fairness and fundamental human rights, because progress in so many other areas depend on it." Unquote. Those countries that have more gender equality do have better economic growth. Similarly, those companies which include women are more durable. Parliament needs to enact more legislation on key social issues such as for women, health, education, anti-discrimination, and child support apart from other general protective legislation. Finally, we have come to conclusion. Today's world is a rapidly changing one. As a result of the international bodies' campaign to uplift and emancipate women since the very inception of Women's Conference held at Mexico, the UN has done a lot in improving the conditions of women. The competent United Nations bodies are always found to have concerned with measures to safeguard women with dignity, and this can be seen through the global conventions, covenants, and protocols wherein in placing many protective rights with due shares for women. Thus, there are a number of international human rights instruments as well as humanitarian documents that aim to safeguard women and girls from being discriminated in different aspects and areas. The states are required to take effective measures to prevent and eradicate this social evil in the best justifiably manner. Thank you.